I remember it like it was yesterday. I was Tasha, just a girl working for her dad's company, starting from the bottom and making my way up. My life was pretty straightforward: work, family, and the occasional night out with friends. That's until I bumped into Alex at that little downtown cafe. It was a busy Tuesday, and I had just finished a long day at the office, dealing with numbers and endless financial reports. I needed a break, a coffee, and maybe a slice of that chocolate cake they had on display. The cafe was crowded, the kind of crowded where you can barely hear yourself think, let alone order a coffee. And that's when I literally bumped into him. "Alex. Watch where you're going," I blurted out, as his coffee nearly decorated my blouse. He looked taken aback for a moment, then a wide grin took over his face. "My bad. I was just trying to navigate through this chaos. Let me buy you a coffee to make up for it?" I was ready to say no. I mean, who was this guy, right? But something about his cheerful attitude, despite the near disaster, made me pause. "Sure, why not? But I'm picking the cake," I shot back, not wanting to seem too easy. As we waited for our order, I took him in. Alex was casually dressed, nothing fancy, but there was something about him that stood out. Maybe it was his easy smile or the way he seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. "So, what brings you to this chaos?" he asked, handing me my coffee and a plate with a generously sized piece of cake. "Work. I was drowning in numbers and needed a break. What's your excuse?" I replied, taking a cautious sip of the hot beverage. "Same. Except my chaos involves teaching kids how to not burn down the school in science class," he chuckled. We found a table in the corner, away from the worst of the crowd. As we talked, I learned that Alex was a high school science teacher, loved bad puns, and had an affinity for old movies. He was easy to talk to, and before I knew it, I was laughing more than I had in weeks. The conversation flowed from work to hobbies to dreams, and I found myself opening up about my aspirations, my family, and even the struggles of climbing up the corporate ladder in my father's company. "You're tough, I'll give you that. Starting from the bottom in your dad's company? That's brave," he said, his tone a mix of admiration and surprise. "It's not about bravery. It's about proving to myself and to him that I can make it on my own, without any shortcuts," I responded, feeling a bit defensive. "Hey, I get it. And for what it's worth, I think it's pretty damn cool," he reassured me, his gaze sincere. The evening flew by, and before we knew it, the cafe was closing. We exchanged numbers, and as I walked home, I couldn't help but smile. In the days that followed, Alex and I couldn't get enough of each other. We texted non-stop, met up for more coffee dates, movies, and even a couple of hikes. The guy had a way of making even the mundane seem exciting. Our conversations got deeper, our laughs louder, and before I knew it, I was falling for him, hard. It wasn't long before we decided we didn't want to be apart. A year flew by in a blur of love, challenges, and adventures. Then, one evening, over a home-cooked dinner in his apartment, Alex got down on one knee. It wasn't fancy, but it was perfect. "Marry me, Tasha. Let's navigate through life's chaos together." Without hesitation, I said yes. We got married in a small ceremony surrounded by those who mattered most. Life with Alex started off more amazing than I could have dreamed. But then, the demands from his family began to creep in, turning our bliss into something less comfortable. One evening, we were having dinner with Alex's mom, Carol, a lady who had a way of wrapping her demands in velvet, making them sound almost reasonable, if you weren't paying attention. "So, Tasha," Carol started, her voice smooth as she passed me the mashed potatoes, "I've been thinking. If Alex worked at your dad's company, and maybe if his sister joined too, it could be beneficial for everyone, right?" I could feel the weight of her gaze, heavy with expectations. Alex, meanwhile, seemed to shrink a bit in his chair. "Carol, you know it's not that simple. My dad's company doesn't work like that. It's about merit, not family connections," I replied, trying to keep my tone light yet firm. Alex finally chimed in. "Mom, let's not push this, okay? Tasha's right. her dad runs a tight ship. It's all about what you bring to the table. But Carol wasn't one to give up easily. But that's exactly my point. Alex brings a lot to any table. And with you there, I'm sure he'd climb up the ladder in no time. The conversation didn't end at dinner. Carol brought it up again and again, and Alex's dad and sister got wind of it too. Before I knew it, I was sitting across from my dad, trying to explain why we should give Alex, his dad, and sister a chance in the company. Dad, I know how we operate, based on merit and hard work. But could we at least give them a shot? Alex really wants to prove himself, and his family, they could use the opportunity. I ventured, feeling a knot form in my stomach. My dad looked at me, his expression unreadable at first, then softened. Tasha, I trust your judgment. But if they're coming in, they're starting from the bottom, same as everyone else. And there won't be any special treatment. If they're up for that, then we'll give it a try. I was relieved, but also a bit apprehensive. I knew this was going to be a tough sell to Carol and the rest. True enough, when I relayed my dad's conditions back to Carol, she bristled. Starting from the bottom? But surely, with you there, they could get a helping hand? I shook my head, firm. No, Carol. It's how my dad runs his business. It's fair. Everyone gets the same treatment. Somehow, they all agreed, albeit reluctantly. 2 months after the whole ordeal with Alex's family joining my dad's company, things hadn't really cooled down. In fact, they heated up again when Carol, my mother-in-law, decided to stir the pot. She was over for what I thought was a casual visit, but then she launched into it. Tasha, I just don't get it. My daughter's been with your dad's company for a while now, and there's no talk of a promotion or a raise. What's going on? I tried to keep my cool, really, I did. Carol, you know the company policy. It's all about performance, and honestly, she's not exactly putting in the effort. Leaving early, making careless mistakes, it's just not how we do things. Carol huffed, clearly not satisfied with my answer. That's just your excuse. You could help if you wanted to, but you don't. You're not looking out for us. It felt like a slap in the face, considering all the strings I'd been trying to pull to keep the peace. And then there was Alex. Whenever we were alone, he was all understanding, nodding along to everything I said. But the moment Carol was in the picture, it was like he switched sides faster than a politician in a scandal. And sure enough, that same evening, Alex came to me, all riled up after a chat with his mom. Tasha, this isn't right. I'm working hard, and so is my sister. Why are we still at the bottom? You need to talk to your dad. We deserve better pay. I looked at him, disbelief washing over me. Alex, come on. You know the situation at work. You're not exactly outperforming anyone. I've been helping, covering for you even, but there's only so much I can do without it being unfair to everyone else. He wasn't having any of it, though. That's just it, isn't it? You're not even trying. My mom's right. You could change things for us if you wanted to. I felt my patience wearing thin. Alex, demanding a raise you haven't earned isn't how this works. It's about fairness, about doing your part. And right now, you're not living up to that. Life, as I knew it, came crashing down one ordinary Wednesday afternoon. The call came in just as I was wrapping up at work, a number I didn't recognize flashing on my phone screen. I almost didn't answer, but something nudged me to pick up. Is this Tasha? A voice asked, formal and unfamiliar. Yes, speaking. Who's this? I replied, a knot forming in my stomach. I'm afraid I have some bad news, the voice continued, and just like that, my world stopped spinning. The details that followed blurred into a haze of disbelief. There had been a train accident, and my parents were on that train. They didn't make it. I stood there, phone still in hand, long after the call ended, unable to move, to think, to feel. It was Alex who found me, who took the phone from my hand and wrapped me in his arms as the dam inside me broke. We need to get you home, Tasha. Come on, he murmured, but his voice seemed miles away. Home. The concept felt so foreign now. What was home without the people who made it so? The days that followed were a blur. Funerals, lawyers, sympathetic looks from people who murmured their condolences without really meeting my eyes. And through it all, Alex's family hovered like vultures, their presence more oppressive than comforting. It was during one of those hazy afternoons, when Carol decided to bring up the subject I was least prepared to discuss, the inheritance. Tasha, dear, now that this unfortunate business is settled, we need to talk about what comes next. Your parents' assets, the company, it's a lot for you to handle alone, she said, her tone a grotesque mix of sympathy and greed. I stared at her, incredulous. Carol, my parents just died. Can we not do this right now? But she was relentless. I know, dear, and I'm just looking out for you. And let's be honest, for Alex too. This affects all of us now. Alex said nothing, his eyes fixed on the floor. That silence, that failure to stand up for me, cut deeper than any of Carol's words. It all came to a head a few days later when the entire family was over at our place. Carol, Alex, his father, his sister, they all acted like they owned the place, discussing plans for the house, the company, as if my parents' lives were nothing more than assets to be divided. Tasha, we were thinking, Carol began, her voice echoing in the living room. It makes sense for us to move in here. It's what your parents would have wanted, for us to take care of you. Take care of me? I repeated, my voice rising. Or take over everything they worked their lives for? Alex finally spoke up, but not in my defense. Tasha, it's practical. We're family now. We should stick together. Family? I shot back, my patience finally snapping. Family doesn't swoop in at the first sign of inheritance like it's some free-for-all. My parents aren't even cold in their graves, and here you are, planning your new lives in their home. The argument escalated, words thrown like daggers, each one exposing the rifts that had been forming for months. In the end, I stood alone in the living room, my stance clear. I want everyone out, I said, my voice steady, despite the chaos raging inside me. Out of this house, out of my life. I need space to grieve, to figure out what comes next, and I can't do that with you all circling like sharks. The fallout was immediate. Alex and his family left, but not without parting shots that stung with accusations of ingratitude and selfishness. My parents' funeral turned into a spectacle I was wholly unprepared for. Alex, along with his dad and sister, followed me to my parents' home. It was supposed to be a quiet moment, maybe a chance for them to offer some genuine support. Instead, it turned into something else entirely. As soon as we walked through the door, Alex started playing tour guide in my childhood home, pointing out all the luxurious details and furnishings as if he was showcasing a mansion on one of those reality TV shows. His enthusiasm was misplaced, to say the least, but what came next was downright appalling. Upstairs, his sister, practically bouncing with excitement, declared she had found her new room, the one with the expansive bathroom my parents had renovated just last year. But the real shock came when Alex opened the door to my parents' bedroom. Carol actually clapped her hands, her eyes wide with what I can only describe as greedy delight. "Oh, I've always dreamed of having a bedroom like this," she exclaimed. "It's decided then, this is where we'll stay." I was stunned into silence for a moment, watching them act as if they'd just won the lottery, rather than standing in the home of two people who'd tragically passed away. My shock turned to outrage, and I couldn't hold it back any longer. "Why are you acting like you own the place?" I demanded, my voice echoing off the walls, louder than I intended. "This is my parents' house, not a free hotel for you to pick rooms." Alex tried to smooth things over with that tone of his, the one he uses when he thinks he can make everything sound reasonable. "Babe, think about it. It makes sense for everyone. We'll be safer and more comfortable together. It's what's best, economically too." His words felt like a slap. Safer? Comfortable? My parents haven't even been gone a month, and you're already planning to move your family into their home? I won't have it. This is too much. He had the gall to look hurt, as if I was being unreasonable. Now that your parents are gone, it's only right you take care of mine, he said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The arrogance, the entitlement, it was as if losing my parents meant I'd inherited a new set of dependents overnight. That's it. I want to talk. Everyone, downstairs, now, I said, my voice firm, commanding. The look on their faces told me they weren't used to being spoken to like that, at least not by me. But I'd had enough. It was time to set some boundaries, make it clear that their expectations were not only unrealistic, but completely out of line. As I watched them all gather in the living room, Carol leading the charge with a gleam in her eye, I felt like I was in some twisted reality show. Now that we're all here, let's talk about the future, she began, her tone dripping with a mix of glee and greed that made my skin crawl. With your father's company and all this, she gestured broadly at the house belonging to us, we're set. My son will take over the business, and if you're not keen on us staying here, well, we can just build something even grander. I stood there, incredulous, watching them nod and smile as if they'd won the lottery. You think all this is yours to claim? I asked, my voice tight with barely contained anger. This is my inheritance, my parents' legacy, not a jackpot for you to squander. Carol scoffed. Oh, please. We're family. What's yours is ours. It's only right that we benefit from this fortune. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You have no right to any of this. My parents worked their entire lives for this, not so you could come in and claim it as your own. Alex's sister piped up, her voice sharp. You're being greedy, keeping all this to yourself. We deserve a share. Greedy? I shot back, my patience snapping. I'm greedy because I don't want to hand over my inheritance to people who only see dollar signs where they should see grief and loss. The room erupted into a cacophony of accusations and denials, their entitlement clashing with my disbelief. I had heard enough. I want you all out, I said firmly, my voice rising above the noise. Out of this house, out of my life. You've shown your true colors, and I want no part of it. Carol's face turned a deep red, her anger palpable. You'll regret this, young lady. You're nothing without us. Alex, who had been silent up till now, finally spoke, his voice cold. Tasha, you're making a mistake. This isn't how you treat family. Family? I repeated, my heart aching at the betrayal. No, this is how I protect myself from vultures disguised as family. With that, they stormed out, hurling insults and warnings as they went. Alex paused at the door, his parting words a knife to my heart. You'll regret this, Tasha. I won't forget it. The door slammed shut, leaving me alone in the deafening silence of the house. I sank to the floor, the weight of the confrontation, of the loss, of the betrayal, pressing down on me. But amidst the turmoil, a spark of resolve flickered to life. I had drawn a line, a boundary, to protect not just my inheritance, but my dignity and my right to grieve. The next morning felt surreal, as if the world had shifted on its axis. I headed to work, the drive automatic, my thoughts a jumbled mess. Arriving at the office, I half expected, half hoped to see Alex, his dad, and sister there, perhaps ready to bury the hatchet and move forward. But their desks were empty, their work untouched. I tried calling them, once, twice, a dozen times throughout the day, but each call went unanswered, sinking me deeper into a mix of frustration and relief. This silent treatment continued for 3 days, their absence speaking louder than any words could. On the 3rd day, with no sign of them and a backlog of work piling up, I made a decision. I called each of them into the office via voicemail, giving them one last chance to explain their absence. The silence that followed was answer enough. I called HR and, with a voice steadier than I felt, instructed them to process their termination. They're not coming back, I said, the finality of it all ringing in my own ears. Firing them was not a decision taken lightly, but in that moment, it felt like the only choice. There was no room for half measures, not anymore. Their betrayal, Alex's especially, had cut too deep, leaving a chasm between us that could not be bridged by mere apologies or promises of change. Later that day, I found myself on the phone with my lawyer, a man who had been with our family for years and knew the intricacies of my life almost as well as I did. "I need you to prepare the divorce documents," I told him, my voice devoid of the emotion that was churning inside me. 2 weeks of silence, and then he just waltzes into my office like he's the king of the castle. There he was, Alex, all sun-kissed and smug, acting as if he hadn't just vanished off the face of the earth. He didn't waste a second before laying it on thick. "I've decided to forgive you," he announced, making himself comfortable in my dad's chair, feet rudely slapped onto the table. "Now, about that money for a new house for my folks and sister." I stared at him, disbelief and anger swirling in a silent storm. "Forgive me? And where exactly have you been?" "On vacation with my family," he said, puffing up his chest. "As the director, I don't owe explanations to a mere accountant." That's when it hit me, he really believed he could dictate the terms here. I kept my voice level, my calm a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside. "You were fired, Alex. And as for being the director? That's over. The divorce papers are filed. You have no claim here. Not to the company, not to any property." The color drained from his face, his arrogance replaced by shock, then fear. "You can't do that. I have rights. I'll get my share." I couldn't help but laugh, a sound bitter and tinged with disbelief. "In our state, your rights don't include my inheritance. You get nothing." He stood, a mix of anger and desperation in his eyes, reaching out for me. "Tasha, please." I stepped back, putting distance between us. "No, Alex. It's done. We're done. Leave." As he stumbled out, I could feel a weight lifting off my shoulders, even as my phone started to ring. "Carol." Her voice was as pleasant as nails on a chalkboard. "You ungrateful girl. How dare you treat us this way?" I listened, her words washing over me, without leaving a mark. "Don't call me again, Carol. It's over. Goodbye." Hanging up, I sat back in my chair, the silence of the office wrapping around me like a blanket. It was over. Really over. I felt a mix of relief, sadness, and, most surprisingly, freedom. Freedom from their expectations, their greed, and their manipulation. After the ink dried on those divorce papers, it felt like I could finally breathe again. I was out from under the weight of Alex and his family's expectations, free to focus on the company and on rebuilding my life in a way that would have made my dad proud. Taking over as director wasn't just a title change, it was stepping into a legacy my dad left behind. And I poured everything I had into it. This past year, we saw profits spike by 8%, a record that felt like a nod from my dad, wherever he was, telling me I was on the right track. Then, one afternoon, amidst all this progress and personal growth, Carol called. Her voice, once so sure and demanding, was tinged with desperation. "We need your help," she started, spilling out a tale of reckless spending, of loans, and luxury they couldn't afford, all because they believed they'd have a slice of my inheritance to bail them out. "Carol, let me get this straight," I said, my voice icy calm. "You lived beyond your means, ignoring the fact that I told you, clearly, that you had no claim to my parents' estate. And now, you want me to clean up your mess?" She tried to butter me up, saying how families should stick together, how I was their only hope. But her words fell on deaf ears. "I'm not your safety net," I told her firmly. "You, Alex, and your daughter made your choices. You chose to ignore my boundaries, to disrespect my parents' memory, and to chase after a lifestyle you hadn't earned." The silence on the other end was palpable. I could almost hear her scrambling for a way to twist this around, to play the victim. "Listen, Carol," I continued. "You need to figure this out. And don't call me again. You made it abundantly clear where I stand with your family when you sided with Alex, expecting to live off my inheritance. Now, you're living with the consequences of those choices. I hung up before she could respond, the finality of that action resonating deep within me. It wasn't just about the money or their latest scheme. It was about respect, about recognizing the value of hard work and the importance of living within your means, a lesson my parents instilled in me from the start.